Okay, in this video, let's go ahead and get our throttle cable installed onto our motor and onto our go-kart. So when you first do this, it is kind of tricky. I've come up with a process of doing it that actually makes it real easy that I'm going to show you. So hopefully the first time you go to do it, it's a little easier for you than it was for me when I first tried to do it. So what we have here is a couple parts that we're going to need. Obviously we need our throttle cable. You've got your throttle cable housing. Here we have the top of our carburetor. We've got a couple of throttle cable clamps here. I choose to run 2. You can just run 1, but I go ahead and run 2 just for a little extra security. We've got the spring that goes inside our carburetor. We've got our carburetor slide. And then we've got some tools over here that we'll need to get the job done. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to put the locking cap over the top of your carburetor like so, and then what we'll do is we'll actually put our throttle cable housing into the boot here just like that. Then we can go ahead and grab our throttle cable and we'll actually feed it through the bottom of the lid to our carburetor and all the way down the cable housing. Just like that. So until we get some tension on this, all this stuff's going to want to fall apart on you. So I'll kind of show you how we're going to put it together, and then we'll go over to the go-kart and we'll get things assembled so you can see how that goes. So from here, what you would do is you'd put your spring over the top of your cable, just like that. And then on our slide here, you're going to notice there's a groove all the way down the edge of your slide there. And what that will do is you'll actually set the throttle cable into the top, and then it goes in just like that. And then once we get all this tensioned up, it's going to actually sit into your carburetor just like that. So from here, let me readjust the camera. We'll go over and take a look at the go-kart and we'll get this installed. Okay, so now we're looking at the top of our carburetor. It's something I like to do just to make this a little bit easier, just so that your carburetor slide isn't dragging in here excessively, as I like to just give it a little quick spray of some WD-40 on the insides of the carburetor here. I also do this after every time I clean my carburetor as well, just to prevent rust or anything else from going on. And what we'll do is we'll grab the throttle cable that we put together over on the bench, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little tension on this side where the throttle cable came out of the housing. So I'll put a little tension on that just so that this stuff doesn't all fall apart on me as I'm trying to get it in here. And then from here, all we're going to do is set our slide down into our carburetor, and there's actually a groove over here on the same side of the carburetor that has the choke arm. And you'll just want to drop your slide in and make sure that lines up, and it'll just slide down in there for you. Just like that. And from there I'll release tension on there, and then what you'll do is you'll just want to get your cap lined up. It's a little bit of resistance with the spring in there. We'll get our cap lined up on the top of our carburetor here, just like so, and go ahead and lock it down. Just like that. So that's done on that side, and then what we'll do is we'll grab this end of our throttle cable, and so there's some guys that actually run a linkage here that on top of their the deck here that they can use to adjust this throttle tension, but we actually run this cable straight to the pedal. So I'll drop it in this little loop that we have here on the side of our motor, just like that. Okay, now let me readjust the camera so you can see where we're routing this further. Okay, so if you remember from the carburetor tuning video, and I mentioned that little bolt that I use to adjust my throttle cable, here it is right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to run our throttle cable and the housing up to the edge of this bolt. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to loosen this up and then I'm gonna bottom it out. That way I'll have some room to adjust my throttle cable once I get back to the track and I need to adjust my idle. So what I'll do is I'll back that locking nut off, and then I'll just go ahead and turn this all the way in. Just like that. Now we can go ahead and grab our throttle cable, get it routed up through here. And you're gonna wanna go underneath your tie rod. Get our housing up in there. You're gonna wanna make sure it's all the way up in there, just like that. Okay, we're gonna need to readjust the camera one more time so I can show you how I get this around the pedal. Okay, we're just about finished. So this is actually the tricky part. And the tricky part is making sure that when our pedal is all the way forward, our carburetor slide is all the way to the top and pulled out of the venturi of the carburetor, allowing all the air to get through into the motor. So the trick that I've found to do that is what I'll do is I'll grab my throttle clamps and I'll slide my throttle clamps over my cable, and I run two. You don't have to run two. So I'll get those installed over the top of my cable. I'll put my cable through the hole on our pedal, just like that. And then I'll put the cable through the other side of the clamps. And we can just do one clamp for now. Just like that. And then from here, what I'll do is I'll just grab a couple of tie wraps, hook them together, and I'll pull my throttle cable and tie wrap it to the front of the chassis, mimicking if we were in full throttle. You're gonna wanna make sure it's tight. Okay. And then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and grab some vice grips. You can use needle nose pliers or something like that for this, but it's definitely easier with some vice grips. And what I'll do is I'll just grab the very tip of my throttle cable, lock it down. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull my throttle cable so my slide comes all the way to the top of the carburetor. And you can actually hear your slide hit the top of the carburetor. Let's see if I can be quiet enough and you can hear that. Yeah, it's gonna be tough for you to hear. But right there, we're at full throttle. So from here, what I'll do is I'll grab my Allen key and I'll just cinch up this top bolt right here. Just barely, just enough to hold some tension on that. Just like that. And then what I'll do is I'll actually show you this in a bit. I'm just gonna make sure that my slide is actually pulled all the way up and we are actually getting full throttle. Feels good. So we can go ahead and release our vice grips off that wire. And we can go ahead and tighten down both bolts on our clamp. You want to make sure those are snug. You do not want this throttle cable slipping. And then what I'll do is I'll run it through my second clamp. And this second clamp's just for a little bit extra security, in case for some reason that front one decides it wants to slide on us. And I'll just tighten it up. Just like that. What I'll do is I'll release my tie wraps and I'll actually leave them on the front of the chassis here in case we have to reset this. And what you'll notice is there's going to be some slack here. And what that means is our slide is all the way down to the bottom of the carburetor. So when I'm out at the track and I go and cinch this up, it's actually going to start putting tension here on that, on the throttle cable, and that's how I'm going to adjust my idle once I get out to the track. But I'm going to release that all the way down just until I get out there, so I can make that adjustment once we're out there and we can run the motor. So let me go back over. We'll show you the inside of the carburetor. Hopefully I can get some light in there so you can see what it looks like when we're actually getting full throttle. Okay, so what you're looking at there is you're actually looking straight down through the venturi of the carburetor, and you can actually see that the slide is down in there, and it's out all the way in the closed position right now. So I'm gonna go to the front of the go-kart and pull the throttle a few times, and you'll also be able to hear that sound I was listening for when I was adjusting the throttle cable the first time. So we'll go ahead and we'll open the throttle. And you can hear that slide hit the top of the carburetor. And let me put the tire wraps back on and come over and show you what you can do. Is you can actually put your finger in here. Make sure your finger's not dirty, but if you slide your finger in here, you can actually feel if your throttle or if your slide's not all the way up. Like you'll put your finger in here and you'll be able to feel the lip of the slide. So what I'll do is I'll just check that and stick my finger in here just to make sure I'm getting full throttle. Come over here and do a visual check as well. And it looks like we're good. So hopefully that process makes it a little simpler for you. Like I said, when I was first doing it, figuring out how to make sure that I was getting full throttle when the pedal was all the way forward was kind of difficult for me. I was actually trying to just kind of eyeball it, pulling tension on the cable while the pedal was all the way back. So this way I found has been a lot easier. It's actually real consistent. I usually only have to set it one time and I'm usually good to go. And simple as that, guys. Definitely something that you can do yourself. You won't have to set it all that often unless you obviously take everything apart and you go clean your stuff out. But that's how you set your throttle cable. Okay, and the last two things I'm gonna wanna show you. I've actually pitted next to the same family golf for probably the last 5 years out at the track. Real good people. The dad, I really value the advice that he's given me over the years. And one thing that he's recommended is that on the top of this boot here that actually sits over our, the top of the cap to our carburetor, is that you're gonna actually wanna get a little piece of wire wrap and actually wrap it around here, because what he said he's seen in the past is that if you're running a rain race and water's running all over the top of this throttle cable housing, is it could actually seep through and you can start getting water down into your carburetor. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and grab a little piece of wire wrap and put it around just the top of the boot, just like so, and we'll cinch it down. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna close the gap there and prevent water from getting down into our carburetor on the off chance that it happens to wanna get down there. And I mean, it's not like you gotta do it too tight, just as simple as that. Snip off your excess and you're good to go. And just bend this out of the way so you're not snagging yourself on it as you're working on stuff. And that's just gonna help prevent water from getting down there in the event that you're running a rain race. And then the last thing I want to show you is we'll come over here. And what we're gonna wanna do is we're gonna wanna use some electrical tape and tape our throttle cable housing to the chassis, so that this isn't flopping all over the place on us. So I'll just grab a little length of electrical tape, just enough to go around the chassis a couple times. And I'll tape my throttle cable housing to the chassis. You could probably use tie wraps for this. I prefer not to, just because I don't want them snitching down, and say for instance you drug a curb, you could tear that tie wrap right off and this thing would be flopping around on you on the track. And I'll just do one more spot. here. Just like that. And you'll notice back here I've actually got my fuel line electrical tape to the chassis as well. And that's it, guys. We are completely done. Throttle cable installed. Obviously we'll need to go out to the track and adjust the idle, but that's it. Simple as that. Definitely something that you can do yourself. These throttle cables will wear out on you eventually, so you may need to replace it. I usually replace mine at the first of every year and run the same throttle cable the entire year. So again, make sure that you've got it set up. It's crucial that you're getting full throttle, so just ensure you're getting full throttle and go out and have a good time at the track.